Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Pinball Arcade. So today we're looking at El Dorado. One thing I've noticed, my internet is now back on, so some things slightly changed, but not worth really mentioning. Like the things that changed are the table of the month updated, and if I was to look, I think at um, like table packs and things like that. I don't think that there's anything that's too different. Like Stern Pack 3 kind of get got updated, so we kind of know that that is what I don't own. Whereas it seems like on Steam, at least at the moment, it's easier for me to rebuy Stern Pack 1 and get this one game than it is to click on this and then spend what looks like $9 for the premium version of it, or $9.99 in the game itself. And which that just seems weird that the DLC purchasing it through the Steam storefront is a different price than this. The other games in that pack were games that existed previously. Uh, Same is probably true for Stern Pack 2, where it is cheaper to buy the pack a second time as they reorganized things. And I feel like that probably, more than anything, highlights a lack of upkeep on the part of Pinball Arcade as far as once they lost those licenses. They seemingly kind of dropped the ball and gave up. You can also see in the achievements, there's a certain level of that also where while there are lots of achievements, 285 still to potentially unlock for me, um, the icons for the achievements on Steam just say high score or have just an image of a target that you would hit in pinball, and it's just using the exact same icon over and over again. Whereas almost every other game would be much more thoughtful about the icons for the achievements, and it would be visually a treat. In all fairness, Steam does have some weird visual extras that they tried to hide and sell to you. The whole idea of trading cards and then forming badges by having a complete collection of trading cards. And then when you form badges, you often get wallpapers and emoticons and things that honestly would have taken an artist maybe a day to make and would have been advertisement free things normally being hidden behind trading cards. And even now, Steam has pretty much given up on the idea of giving trading cards and having it so that people on Steam can trade the trading cards like they were real world items. Now they are going instead to a point system that you get points that have no real cash value, very much close to the ticket system you would see in an arcade. In fact, yeah, they are just stealing the entire idea. So now Steam Points exists, and they are offering the same low effort wallpapers and emoticons and things like that. On top of which, they introduced animated GIFs that are single use or five use in the chat, which the idea of paying real world money, because while they try to hide it, you only get Steam points by buying games, and at a certain point, you can only buy so many games on Steam. I guess maybe you get points for buying in-app purchases, and then that could go on forever. But the whole system is it's not particularly consumer forward as far as treating a consumer like a valued customer, and instead it is distracting to say the least and insulting to say the most. It's distracting because people really just want to play their games. While I am a sucker for achievements, I am definitely not a sucker for emoticons and wallpapers and trading cards. Although I did for a long time try to build up my gamer score on Steam so you could have more friends, and undoubtedly they're going to at a certain point um, remove a hard limit for older accounts, at least as far as how many friends you can have on Steam. Not that too many people even use that system. I used it much more on Xbox Live, friending random people. I don't get random friend requests for people on Steam. There's just too many people playing too many different games. So that concept kind of failed too. Um, Starting off topic though, let's play some El Dorado. I could have talked about that stuff while I was playing. El Dorado from 1975 features a playfield that was used for multiple tables, including El Dorado City of Gold, released in 1984. This playfield was also released in Italy, called Lucky Strike, a 4-player replay version called Target Alpha, a 4-player replay version released in France called Canada Dry, a 2-play replay version called Solar City, designed by Ed Krinsky. The game features classic electromechanical gameplay with 4 flippers, 2 sets of drop targets, and 10 rollovers that can be lit for big points. 2,875 units of this table were produced. So this would be the first table we play with rollovers. It is also the first table that just is going to completely highlight the repetitiveness that you can certainly have in a table design and save yourself on the production value, because it is like months and months, if not a couple of years, for a good pinball table designer to design a table. There's just a lot of QA you have to do there, a lot of testing. Here we see, can I zoom out? No, I can tilt forward. We have a non-bilateral symmetry here, and this is very classic to have a target here and have a loop here, so there isn't just a big like wedge or wall of nothing on the left with one bumper, and then a sneak target back here, and then a side loop, and then you have upper playfield flippers at different locations, and then you have 2 lanes here on top of 3 lanes up here, which that's a kind of interesting skill shot that will light up and change around, I imagine, as far as what the skill shot is, assuming it has one. And then you have a considerably high number of drop targets in the back. And I don't think there's anything back behind the drop targets. So I don't think you're supposed to get the ball behind there. And that just looks like there's a light to the left. This is another one of these table explorations where you can get up to this point, and that's it. So yeah, they just reskinned the game, so nothing would have been moved probably, or very little would have been changed or moved, and they would have just taken the table services, which arguably by the time a new reskin of this game came out, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the table had been worn out quite a bit too. Like, particularly if these were just like hand painted images, or whatever quality of paint would have existed back in the day. I wouldn't be surprised if it had been faded and needed to be replaced. So they would have just kind of changed the art, maybe changed the art on the drop targets. I'd kind of assume that. But every other element would have been exactly the same, and that would have worked fairly well. I kind of question if originally a lot of the instruction area here looked like this, and if they're not really just extrapolating what modern pinballs look like. But there is also weirdness in the fact that you just don't have a different skin here, where it feels like there should have been a different skin. And I would say that even though there's 42 lines of dialogue here, it probably doesn't hurt you too much when playing this game just kind of cycle through this without actually reading any of the text. That way you know where the camera centers, so you know where there is something to hit, just in case you miss something. Because I could imagine on some pinball tables there being something kind of hidden. And then we just read the history. And let's see if we can scale up the flyer. Again, the flyers look like they were either printed with 1974 technology, which of course they would be, or they just didn't have the same kind of colors. Assuming that this flyer is real, which I have to assume it is, then I guess that does kind of confirm that the instruction area does look like the way they depicted it. You can see the coin acceptors are fairly different back there, and we were, I suppose, at quarters even at that point. We never got back far enough where it was dimes or nickels or multiple or a dime and a nickel to play a pinball game. I guess they're just not that old. Looking at this flyer though, you can definitely see how, even though they tried to be as accurate as possible, if this flyer is photorealistic image of what the table looked like, what the table looks like in the game is a bit of an artistic interpretation. They tried, but they've got some colors that look like they're slightly off, and there's some elements here that look like they had to make decisions. They probably, for a lot of these tables, maybe had one or two old tables that they could look at, and that's it. See, that table almost looks like there's a way to get the pinball stuck up at the top there. I don't think that's the case, though. That would be very weird. But yeah, they had to make some decisions. Our standard goals are going to be hit the 1K target, hit the lit drop target, light to special, score 20,000 points in one ball, score at least 80,000 points. So we do know that this is still going to be a fairly standard old-fashioned pinball table. It's not going to be scoring a lot. So yeah, we still don't have ball savers. We still have a fairly wide, empty area. When you have upper flippers, that's nice. There are metal pieces behind the flippers to stop the ball from potentially sinking in an unfair way. Although I don't know if those really ever work, because it's still fairly easy to trap the ball behind the flipper and in between the metal pegs. And it's not like it's likely to bounce back. We are seemingly maybe affecting which ones are lit. You can see how the ball just jumped over the metal part. It didn't really even bounce back. We still are getting very ding ding dingy with it. Wow, that took quite a while for that to reset. Seems like they tried to emulate the animation of the counter resetting, which I don't think that's necessary, and that would be nice if there was if you were going to do that, you needed to offer a option to not do that, because that's going to just slow down the flow of playing the next game. There is something kind of unique to pinballs, tables, and pinball in general, that there aren't really credits that play when you, like, get to the ultimate goal in a pinball table. The game doesn't end, of course, but if there are going to be any credits, they're usually rolling in the attract screen when nobody is playing. They are not taking up anyone's time, because you can always put in a new quarter and continue playing or start a new game. It seems to me like there's only one rollover target in this table, and it's right in the middle. It is right in that center lane, which that's the shot to practice if you need to practice anything, and those are achieved by just a magnetic sensor, basically, that can sense that the metal ball's rolling over it. At least that's usually how it's done. I can't attest that every single table did it that way. It's not a pressure sensor or a capacitance sensor. I'm not sure a pinball table would have ever been designed where a capacitance sensor would make sense. I'm not sure that a metal pinball would even change the capacity of something above it consistently enough. Of course, nowadays you would do it by simply having like an infrared receiver and a light distance, like passive infrared receiver, PIR is what they're called. That would be a great way to do it, or I imagine there's half a dozen other ways. I wonder if see, we kind of need to see how many standard goals are left. We need to light the special and score 80,000 points. See, and this is a great example of where the goals get in the way of actually playing pinball. It's because if you are trying to play pinball, pausing the game to check these extra goals is not that helpful. In an interesting twist to the billiards game, Hot Shot and Long Shot, this is a table that is much more around the idea of getting that central line and getting the far back targets instead of practicing left and right. Nudging here is going to have less of an effect, and while there are two bumpers on the table, they feel like they are just added out of necessity. You don't have them anywhere near to each other. The introducing of the flipper on the upper right is kind of there for no good reason. You could have just had a rubber bumper that would have shot it up, kind of like a flat version of a bumper, which we haven't seen one of those on the table yet. And the trigger on the left kind of makes sense, but it only makes sense because the table is so incredibly long. It would almost make more sense in my mind to have the drop targets move down a little bit more and have something behind it. And see, this is a theme of El Dorado, which is just westerns. Westerns have long since become completely uninteresting to people in the United States. There is, I think, an argument that could be made that westerns were also kind of shoved down the throat of a lot of people in the early days of entertainment, as far as novels and TV and movies. And as soon as we started having, um, as soon as we started having sci-fi become a thing, they all the Western writers just placed Western stories in sci-fi environments, which gave them more opportunity to do weirder things, whereas Westerns were tied down to reality a little bit more. And we've never really seen a major resurgence, and any time anybody tries to do like a Western in modern times, it is usually so incredibly violent and mean and hateful that it's not well received. Um, whereas like kung fu movies have managed to stay around fairly well, and we occasionally will get a mystery movie. Um, Not probably as many as we used to. And horror as a genre is a very big genre, but it really didn't go anywhere because horrors in particular include a realm of technology and fantasy and showing something that you can't see anywhere else. But yeah, Westerns pretty much didn't have anything to offer after they'd just been replaced. And so we went from Westerns pretty much to a high focus on sci-fi. Brief stints, but never a major focus on fantasy. And we have now hit the comic book era in which Disney has allowed the Marvel Universe to kind of dominate with their projects. And that, I suppose, is still technically fantasy, but you would hardly compare it to something like Lord of the Rings. Fantasy has a problem of, well, Lord of the Rings in particular has a problem of being super long. We will see that in pinball, to get back to pinball, there will be a lot of tables that just pick the theme by throwing a dart on a dartboard, basically, and it doesn't have any real relevance to the story or to the gameplay. I mean, it really couldn't. Like, even the best themed pinball tables still are just pinball tables. And for instance, like the Family Guy pinball table has a mini pinball table with a mini pinball that's supposed to be Stewie playing pinball, and that's fairly well themed, although it does run into the problem of the fact that in Family Guy, Stewie never plays pinball. But it still doesn't really change the table much. You could have easily skinned it for any other character. It could have been a Simpsons pinball table, and it could have been Maggie's playing mini pinball. And arguably, I would say the Simpsons, the Family Guy pinball table is pretty bad. I recall playing it once, and after about the 6th or 7th game, I was already done with it, and I had put, often you would get, when playing pinball, you get more free games if you put more money in to start, and so I had put probably about $5 worth of credit into the Family Guy pinball table, and I was winning free games like crazy, and so I still had like 250 or 2 or 3 games on the table, and I finally just walked away, and somebody else was playing there. A little kid was in the arcade, and I said, I am just tired of playing this game. There's some free games there if you want to play. Which pinball players tended to do that quite a lot too, that they would win free games and they wouldn't be able to regulate their schedule, so they would be on like their lunch break, or they would have to be somewhere. A lot of times you were playing pinball or arcade games before a movie would start, if a movie theater had an arcade, and so you wouldn't want to miss the beginning of your movie. So it was fairly common in arcades to have somebody leave free games um, into a machine, and that definitely helps sustain my love of playing arcade machines, because there was plenty of times when I didn't have any pocket change or money, and yeah, putting $5 in the Family Guy pinball table was a lot, but at that point the tables were asking for like 75 cents or $1.25 a game. The price has relatively gone high. Now I wouldn't be surprised if I found a pinball table out in the wild, if it would want something like $2.50. But then also there's the only place you'd pretty much find a pinball table is probably a barcade or some other place that is hoping to get profit from either alcohol sales or something else, and they might keep the prices artificially low on the arcade machines, either alcohol sales or food sales. I am a little bit lost on this table in particular as to how am I supposed to get up to 80,000, because I feel like I've done quite a lot here and I'm still struggling. This feels very much like I just need to keep things going, and I just need to light things up multiple times. And I guess the number 2 that it was showing me there was the level of high rank I'd made? No. I guess that's not what it was. Yeah, the menu system still is a little weird here. Game? Standard goals. Score at least 80,000 points. Yeah. Yeah. Once, oops, I changed the skin on the pinball table. That's not gonna work particularly well. Almost feels like being able to change the skin on the pinball table should increase the score you get. But at a certain point, if you're gonna just cheat, and it's gonna let you cheat, it should just let you cheat in lots of ways. And seemingly they have kind of an anti-cheating stance where if you cheat, you can't get any of the wizard goals done or any of the standard goals done. All the center lane shots pretty much always are going to run into this scenario where if you shoot the ball straight up center wise, there's a decent chance it's going to come right back down and drain out the center lane, or it's going to come down with such ferocity that it's going to drain out the out lanes. And once we get to more modern tables, there will be music playing, and that's when the theme will start happening. When there's voice acting, when there's music playing. If it weren't for Gorgar and some of the other early games to really introduce the audio element, this would be pretty bad. I'm still not sure what that counter is at the bottom there. It must be a multiplier. It must be a score multiplier of some sort. But it's not particularly a high enough score multiplier. Let's see. That felt kind of sluggish. Well, I'm uploading videos right now, but there's really no reason why the game should have lagged there. If it did, maybe it didn't. Keep an eye out for that. That would be definitely a big problem too, is any pinball game has to be completely smooth. Now in all fairness, I did go into the configuration and I have like an RTX 1080 video card, which I doubt this game implements ray tracing, but it does have a DirectX 11 version of it, or up to DirectX 12, although I don't really feel like there's much difference between DirectX 11 and DirectX 12. Just a few little optimizations, and I've yet to see a game that demands DirectX 12. But yeah, I turned up all of the quality of graphics as much as you can, but you can really only do so much on a game like this. It is going to come down to the base resolution of the 3D models and the textures of the table, and if they had designed these to be 1080p native resolution images, and then they were being scaled down to lower resolutions when they originally came out, by 2021 we'd like these to be 2K, 4K, or even 8K resolutions, if not actual 3D scans and pictures of everything. Pinball tables also have some limitations in which you can't cheat. Everything has to be visible at all times, pretty much, and all the memory and the video RAM has to be used up. But on the other hand, pinball tables are not likely to go anywhere new or do anything different, so after an initial load, an 8K image would just stay in the video RAM for the entire playing of the game. I wouldn't be surprised if doing 8K is still out of the realm of realistic. It definitely would also be a weird experience if FarSight Studios, I believe that's the company that makes Pinball Arcade, if they came out with a Pinball Arcade 2 and they said, we've redone all the tables and now they're at 2K resolution, but we've got to sell them to you again. That would be a hard sale, frankly. I should have changed the skin while I was out there. And see, can you... Let's see. Yeah, you can exit the table. That's about all you can do. I feel like adding that skin may literally have caused the game to lag a little bit. Interesting. I feel like Pinball FX2 also had that problem, and so whenever I get around to playing Pinball FX3, I would like to get the feeling that it's more optimized and less sluggish, because any amount of sluggishness is going to be severely unacceptable. We've already seen that there is at least 2 tables in this collection where they could do relatively little work and have a different version of that table offered, because we have Long Shot, I believe is the table that they did offer, where the single player version of that Hot Shot could have also been offered. Otherwise it seems like they're just kind of sticking to a concept that they will only support tables that originally supported multiplayer, which I don't feel like there's a real good reason for that. I suppose it is worth mentioning that some of the early pinball tables that did support multiplayer did not reset between different players' turns, so drop targets would not go back up and be memorized and replaced. In the digital world, you could either stick with that and have it play the way it originally did, or you could have a mode that did memorize the states of every drop target and every little thing. There is certainly something unique about the necessary addition of multiplayer to pinball, because it's very, very easy to get into a game of pinball and hog the machine for what is not considered an acceptable amount of time for everybody waiting behind you, and breaking somebody's stride and making them take turns is also a great way to make people lose and score less, win less free games, and not do as well. That's one of the things about arcades. Was originally in arcade machines, the joysticks were on the right and the buttons were on the left, and people playing in arcades got so good at that and were winning so much, and the arcade machine, the arcade owners at that time, who were really only surviving through the actual sales of the quarters and the machines. They had to switch it around to the now standard joysticks on the left, or somewhat standard joysticks on the left, buttons on the right stance. Which does make an interesting argument that if somebody made a controller where the analog left stick was on the right and the face buttons that usually are on the right were on the left, people might be particularly better at games might be fairly easier, although I don't know if anybody really wants that. Like, we got better as gamers too, so through that adversity, through those shenanigans, we've been able to become better players. Like, chess would be particularly easier if you made it checkers, but that's not a good argument to get rid of the rules of chess and make them checkers. So the one did light up when I lined everything up. So you're getting a score multiplier that passes along. Now it's 2. So it's not lining up every drop target, it's lining up some, either the lower drop targets? No, I don't think so. Now it's 3. So it seems like every time I go over that top line, it increases the number, but not the bottom sensor. So there must be 2 sensors. And it seems like it's fairly sensitive. This has to be our last game because I don't want these episodes to go incredibly long. But I will say this does feel like a table that I could have. I got up to 4. Like, I could have gotten that to 80,000, certainly, if I give it another 30 minutes, gave it another game. But yeah, overall, not a lot to say about this table. We can look at the leaderboards if I was logged in, which I guess I haven't logged in. It would be interesting to see what would happen if I tried to log in, because would I have to make an account, or would they just share the Steam account anyways? Yeah, Big Shot. So we know Big Shot was originally called Long Shot, so we could have gotten an A option to toggle that. We know Eldorado, which does have a pro mode, could have easily been reskinned, although in all fairness, I think half of the work is getting the artwork done, so reskinning isn't something that they could probably do for free. But I would much prefer to be able to buy a skin pack for several games, and it clearly explained that this is skin packs for games that you already you already own, or this is a pack of tables that you might already own that have been reskinned, because in the real world, those tables were reskinned. I don't know if there's going to be much of a difference of an experience if I had played Canada Dry instead of Eldorado, though. The table itself is still the table. Anyways, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.